Okay, great, thanks. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the February 18th Electrical Board meeting. Everybody's gotten the agenda and accompanying attachments, I presume. For the record, I would note that all appointed board members are in attendance with the exception of Jacqueline Derby today. Everybody's received a copy of the previous board's minutes from November 5th. Anybody have any comments to make, or would somebody like to make a motion on that?
Make a motion, we accept, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Byrd, second. Any discussion on those minutes? Corrections, modifications? Hearing none. All in favor of accepting the minutes, indicate by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are accepted unanimously. Okay. Early this morning, we got a copy of the DCP investigation division report. It should have been in your email. Everybody's seen that and has printed it out and have even had a chance to review it. I haven't reviewed it, so if you don't mind, I'd like to take a minute just to go through it real quick. And everybody can do the same. And if anybody has a question, we'll raise them at that point. So. Okay. Question for Janita, maybe?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Under column N, resolution notes, the first three in particular, it says contact legal. Is that?
Those three files were sent to legal. I know Attorney Paul Grabowski is here. He's the newest DCP attorney for Pro and Real Estate. Attorney Fernandez did handle those three files. So I don't know if Attorney Grabowski could answer or if Attorney Fernandez would need to provide additional information.
I guess, yeah, what I'm looking for basically is just some sort of a status on them.
So I don't have a copy of that report, Janita. So I don't know what the cases are. If they were handled by Cynthia, I'll have to get an update from her on those. I know I have two cases in my queue that were forwarded to me recently, and those are both waiting for compliance meetings before we would pursue a hearing. So we have to do the compliance meeting first. But that's two cases, and I don't have that report, so I don't know if those are on there or not.
Okay.
I apologize. I did not put you on that email when I sent it to everybody this morning. So yes, he does not have the report. I can do share screen if you want me to.
I think in all fairness to Attorney Grabowski,
Yeah.
since he doesn't have the report, and Attorney Fernandez is who presented these cases in front of the board for hearings, I think she would be the appropriate person to speak on that.
And in fairness to Attorney Grabowski, I think we can look to get a report at next month's meeting, or at our next meeting from him. So he has an opportunity to make sure he gains the files and has an opportunity to review them and so forth. Anybody have any objection to that? Okay, so let's do that. Okay. He can report on those at the next meeting.
Were there specific cases, or you just like him to report on, to be present at the next meeting to report on any that may be on the list that you have questions about?
Yeah, any Yeah, not only these, but any on the list, but I can't expect him to report on anything he hasn't seen yet, so.
Right. Okay.
We're not that unreasonable on this board. Are
No,
we,
you're
Karen?
not. No, I was gonna say, no, you're not at all. Okay,
Okay, I mean, scanning through the rest of these, I don't have any question right now.
Okay.
Anybody else? If we can keep this report in our file, that way we can look, if we look at it a little more in depth, even after the meeting, we can talk about it at next meeting, so. All right, thank you, Janita, for the getting that report out, though.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next item is old business, our task force working groups. We had established quite a while back, continued education task force, as well as C, the review of license qualification task force. And we did not do B at that time, just because of timing. We turned those reports in, or I turned the reports in to the department, to the commissioner. She had thanked me for the work that we all put into it. But we have yet to truly be able to meet with, or been requested to meet with the department staff relative to some of those recommendations that we made. We spent a lot of time on this, both of these task groups. And I know we're in session now, and undoubtedly there's stuff coming out, and some of them may have an impact on things we talked about. Mr. Costello, I see you got your hand up. No, you don't. That was me. Sorry, over your head. Mr. Byrd.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know serving on that committee with Mr. Costello, we did put some guidelines together, and I noticed in a recent bill that was raised, 5151, in section 5, they talk about continuing education going online. We did talk about putting caps on that as a group. I believe it was 30 online per instructor and no more than 50 in person per instructor. The reason being is to be able to transfer that information between the students or the attendees and the instructor to make sure that we were getting the proper training that we need, that the intent of the training of the continuing education. I don't see that in the current regulations in that bill 5151. I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if you've had a chance to fully review that or not. Or Mr. Costello.
I did not have a chance to fully review it, 5151. I do have a copy of it. I did get recently, but I did have a conversation with Leslie O'Brien, in particular to the continued education. And relative to some of the language in there, in that we were, I believe Chairman Appleby from the Plumbing Board, which is the other board that's affected by continued ed, also had a similar or conversation that we're very insistent that if we go online, that it needs to be in person. And I'm just looking here now, I see what it says. It says in person or through an online technology platform that includes real-time video and enables participants to interact with instructors in real time. So they kind of got that part covered, but we had other things in there relative to online. One of them that pops to my mind is we have put a ratio in there of, and I don't recall exactly the numbers, but so many, if you were going to offer online, you had to also offer so many in-person classes. Does that sound familiar, Rich or Paul?
Yes. Yeah, and matter of fact, what we talked about was, and correct me if I'm wrong for everybody on the committee, was that they were to be 6 in-person classes. And I don't know if they were just 6 in-person classes. They could be held out of state, but you have to hold the in-person classes as well as the online classes.
Mhm. And Paul, you want to spit?
Yeah, that's from my memory as well. As far as the couple of things, the student to instructor ratio, we had set limits for both in-person. If I remember correctly, it was 50 per instructor for in-person and 30 to 1 instructor for online courses to be able to manage those. We did also talk about and discuss putting the limitations that Rich was just explaining for the in-person classes. And I was trying to think, there was a couple other things. I'm trying to find my notes, so apologize because I didn't have them in front of me here.
Larry,
Yes.
I had my hand up.
Okay, Rich, sorry about that. I didn't see it.
That's all right. What I want to add to this is that 5151 makes a statutory change to allow online. And then through the regulations, we'll put in all these different conditions. So this just gives us authority to now create regs for online offerings.
Okay.
So that's why it's just basic language going in, because it's making a statutory change. And then through the regulations, we provide the detail of what we expect out of online, or, you know, the number of attendees, et cetera.
Right, but if this bill, I mean, I got this question then, Rich. If this bill is approved, well, I'm just looking at it. And it goes into effect, let's say, July 1st of this year, 2022. Because we have another situation that something like that happened to. In that the bill goes into effect, let's say July 1st of this year. There's nothing here that says, in my opinion, that says anything that we, before this can really take effect, and that we can accept any applications or any of that nature, that we have to have the regulations drawn and approved.
Right, I understand that. I mean, that's something, I mean, you either got to think about whether you want all the odds and ends added into this 5151 and have it permanently in the statutes, or whether you want to have, as years go on, be able to just do regulation changes to adjust things to what you're looking for.
Yeah, see, because
I mean, I understand where you're coming from. Right away, it'll become effective and people can just start doing online. You'd have to talk to Leslie or the legal staff to see whether or not the department could just create an in-house policy saying it shall not be more than 30 attendees, et cetera, and these different conditions you would like to have in the interim until we put it permanently in the regs.
yeah, because it almost seems, and I understand statutes then develop into regs, if you will, or is the directive to develop a reg, but it seems to be that there's a gap there. I mean, where, you know, we've got a similar situation that exists right now relative to the 90-day requirement for continued ed to be completed 90 days prior to license renewal. Okay, that was passed for effective, I think it was October of last year or July of last year. Well, none of the license holders were made aware of that until very recently. And so it's created a little bit of a problem as far as trying to get things done, people getting their licenses, their continued ed done and so forth. So and not to get off on a tangent of that issue, but I think this particular bill 5151, as it relates to our task force and so forth, I guess it sounds like we may need to have a conference with Leslie on it. I just am concerned that once this goes into effect, assuming it goes into effect, and I don't want to go speak against the department on this when it's partially what we are in agreement with, but we want everything in there that we really talked about, okay, which maybe it does belong in reg. So is it conceivable you could change the regs first and then add this in? I don't know. That's all how they do that fancy legislative stuff.
I think the regs was gonna be a longer process to get online immediately. So that's why they're put it in the 5151, because the regs could have been changed. Because the regs is where it says classroom. So the regs could have been changed, but that's sometimes a year process as well. And because online is needed, especially with what's going on in today's world, and a lot of people working from home, et cetera. That's
Okay.
why they thought they would just put it in 5151 and get it done this session right away.
I mean, my guess is that that if this stays in there the way it is, it becomes effective July 21st, 2022, as it says in the beginning of section 5. It takes a year or it takes 2 years, whatever it takes to get the regulations done because of the amount of time it does take, that providers are going to say, well, wait a minute, it's the statute. I can do that. I can do online. It doesn't give me any restrictions. There's no restrictions here on the size of the class. There's no restriction here on one of the things we put in there that you can't do these classes in a contractor's office for obvious reasons. And then of course that ratio we had attached to this thing. So my gut feeling is that the industry, I think, will come out and object to this, to be honest with you, because I know, and not speaking for both sides, the union and the merit shop side, but that's how we put these task force together, so that there would be industry agreement on what wants to be changed. And that, I'm sure, is a result of them talking to their members and contractors and so forth. So it's very, that's concerning.
5151 is still in general law committee, correct? Or hasn't been brought up yet, correct? So maybe
No.
maybe it could be added into some of the meaningful things that you're looking for could be added to 5151.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to have to arrange a meeting with Leslie. And I don't know if the entire board wants to be involved in that or just the task force group here. What's your pleasure? Paul?
I would think probably, recommend that the board looks at it as a whole. Because it not just affects the working group Rich and I worked on, but it does also affect the limited license work group, because they would have the same criteria to meet as well. So I think it's a little bigger than that. I think, we should collectively work on it together.
Okay.
Yeah, there's language that's very confusing, Mr. Chair, like you had spoken. Starting on line 209, particularly moving down to line 212, where it says establish requirements for accredited continuing professional education for electricians licensed pursuant to sections 330 to 20-341. Is that the portion of the establishment that the requirements that the task force put together, together, that Mr. Herbert was talking about? Not 100% sure. Because the language is kind of confusing in there because it talks about the commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Chair, that, we should have the whole board should have just an understanding of what the intent of that language is there. Paul, I don't know if you agree.
I do as well. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. All right, then any other board members have any comments? Are you in agreement with doing that? I will reach out to Leslie and see if we can get a meeting pretty quick here, because I don't know how fast this bill is going to go through general law and that's the place to try to get it corrected if we're going to modify it at all. The whole reason why we did these task forces, so that anything that the department was going to put forward that impacted any of us as well, that we'd be well aware of in advance, which so that we could agree, disagree, and ultimately come to an agreement so that we could be supportive of each other. I think it looks kind of foolish if the department proposes something and then the industry gets up there and says, no, we don't like that. So trying to make nice for everybody here. All right, I will reach out to Leslie and see what we can do to get a quick Zoom meeting in. It'll probably be, I'm going to try for next week, because quite frankly, and I'm not sure, is Monday a holiday for the state, Mr. Attorney Grabowski? Yes, okay. All right, so we got a short week next week to try to deal with this, but.
And Karen, if you're gonna have the entire board, Karen will have to host it and publish it on our website, et cetera,
Okay,
as if it's a regular meeting, with this
Okay.
being the agenda item.
okay,
Right, and there are two, we have a meeting Wednesday for application review, and then, there is another board meeting on Thursday. So I'll look at at the calendar after the meeting. It may be kind of tricky to squeeze that in next week.
okay.
So we'll take a look. If you want to, you can always email me after the meeting if you want, and I can take a look in the meantime at the Zoom calendar.
Okay, yeah, I will do that. I'll reach out to you after the meeting. We'll look at the calendars.
Okay.
And we'll have to see if Leslie is available too, because,
I was going to say Leslie's very busy, so well, yeah. All right, we'll work on it though.
yeah, definitely.
So the agenda item for the next meeting, special meeting, will be review of review of proposed bill 5151. It's change the online education, just so Karen knows.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. Okay, so then let's move on to item number 2, under old business, and that was the Public Act 2130-37. And that's the one requiring in contracts that the person, besides the contractor's license being on the contract, that the person performing the work, the journey person, et cetera, would have to be listed as to who they are and what their license numbers are on that contract. And that could be something that was evolving throughout the project itself. I believe there's something in proposed bill 5151, but I have not had a chance. This just, I believe, just came out. And I believe there is something in 5151 addressing some of that. So I think, Karen, to that posting of the meeting, the next meeting,
Mhm.
I think we should also include a review of Public Act 2137 with Leslie. And
Okay, just so that you know, because she was at, to back up the licensing board, several of them, just like yours, were concerned about the language that went into this, the
Mhm.
2137. And as you know, the department is aware of that. The department has made proposed corrections, and those corrections are being addressed at the current legislative session that's going on right now. So that is in progress. Changes being made to sort of correct what was initially put in this public act. So I'm sure she can speak to that when we do have the meeting, but that is moving forward.
okay. That's in this 5151, I believe.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that.
Yeah,
5151.
yeah. It's, I don't want to take the time to try to find it in here, but okay. Yeah, so we can discuss that with Leslie. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Okay, item number 3, discussion regarding OSHA 30 completion requirement for approval of applications. The position, the Department of, and again, this is where things I think need to be cleaned up a little bit. The position from the Department of Labor is that there is no requirement in the program, contrary to what we all read and believe, okay, on this board, that OSHA 10 or OSHA 30 is required, okay? There is a component in there relative to safety, okay? And therefore, the enforcement of requiring OSHA 30 is not something we can do, supposedly. However, and again, I believe this is where there's a gap in communications. Just like the number of hours, the Department of Labor says is 576 hours of related instruction and not 720 as we've been utilizing for the beginning of time almost, okay? Granted, you can complete an apprenticeship program federally at 576 hours. That's what the federal requirement says, okay? But I don't believe there's anything that stops the appropriate licensing board from adding hours to that in order to get a license. We make the determination of what's required to get a license. So, and we kind of addressed that as well in some of the statutory stuff that we talked about a little while ago. So I think to address that, we need to take and really have a good sit-down meeting with the legal department on these issues that we have and get them changed in the regulations. Okay. There's nothing that I see no reason why we can't say required to qualify for let's say an E2 license. The applicant must have completed a bona fide apprenticeship program plus X number of additional hours in these areas of study, okay? I think between those two components then makes the applicant qualified, in our opinion. The way I read our duties is that's one of our requirements is to take and determine the requirements to obtain a license. Okay, so I think that's something we need to sit down and have a nice meeting with Leslie on as well in the department. And if necessary, you know, our attorney from the AG's office, because the department attorneys have been super great and super helpful on a number of issues that have come up, but ultimately they are not our attorneys giving us recommendations. It comes out of the AG's office. And for the most part in the past, we've always been able to work this out with the department, and I think we should be able to continue to do that. And I certainly hope so. So as far as this item, I think it's something that we have to continue to table right now until we meet with the department to review regulations. How does everybody else feel? I see everybody shaking their head yes, so
Yes.
Paul?
I agree, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of misconception. Just I hear it in continuing ed classes. You know, what's the requirement? Is it 576? Is it 720? Reciprocal license with application as far as if I have a journey person's license in another state, how do I apply, make application for an E2 or E1? And what's the process for that as well?
Mhm.
I think it all kind of ties together.
I agree.
I do too. I know I've just had to help some people with their Massachusetts hours. And Massachusetts is actually saying that they're not accepting some of our hours, even though that we have more hours in our, in our program than Massachusetts does, because they're still at 6, whatever in Mass. They're not even accepting some of ours and rejecting the applications, and we're taking everybody's application, regardless of what they have.
And it's interesting you say that, because when we do our application review group, which is on a new business here, we're basically being directed through the department that if they have 576 hours and they have a related instruction, and they have 8,000 hours of on-the-job training, okay, that qualifies them. And yet, a lot of times we're looking at people from Massachusetts with 600 hours, because that's what Massachusetts was requiring. And yet now you're telling me Massachusetts isn't accepting our 576 even. And I thought everybody's supposed to be working under the same DOL, at least the same DOL minimum requirements.
Right. And we're actually requiring Connecticut residents to have more hours,
Right.
to complete their apprenticeship program than we are from someone out of state.
Correct. So we're being, I'm going to say, unfair to the Connecticut taxpayer in putting an olive branch out to the out-of-state people and let them jump ahead of everybody. It's not right. It's not right. I think there's a lot of stuff that has to be ironed out on these issues. And again, but we need to be able to sit down and have that reasonable meeting with the department. So far, we've identified 3 or 4 things here that we need to talk to the department about in general. But the general discussions need to include the detailed components. Okay. I will address a little bit more when we get on the new business, the application review working group. But if everybody's okay with tabling 3 at this point, till we meet with the department. I would like to do that.
Mr. Chair, do you need a motion to the table?
Sure, that would be a good idea.
Motion to table agenda item 3.
I'll second.
You want to add
Uh,
that from until we meet?
Until we meet as a group.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Byrd, thank you. Any discussion on that by the board members? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we're gonna table that till we can set up a meeting with the department. This will probably be something different than the meeting we're trying to do next week, obviously. Okay. Next week is to take care of an immediate problem that's in the pipeline. Item number 4 is the update on continuing education for electrical license types for the 2022 cycle. We kind of touched on that a little bit here, but again, it goes to the issue relative to the 90-day requirement in the license holder not having notice. I know I've had previous discussions with the department, and I'm not sure what the department's, and maybe Pam might be able to answer this, I don't know. Excuse me, what the department's plans to do if people do not complete them on time. Get their continued ed complete before license renewal date. Are they planning to withhold issuing the renewals to them? Are they planning on issuing ultimately through a process penalties? Pam, can you add to that?
So that is not my, excuse me, my area. That's legal and
Okay,
also licensing services, but I can see if I can get you an answer later today.
okay, that would be great. I would appreciate it. Thanks, Pam. You're always so helpful.
I try. Thank you.
No, you are. I mean it seriously. So, I mean, I'm curious because, you know, I've quite frankly indicated before that if people come before the board because the department brings them before the board because they didn't get their renewal done in time, not from my standpoint, I'm going to request that the board dismiss the case because of them not having reasonable notification of the change in law. I mean, it's not fair. Okay, any questions on that? I know it's creating a lot of problems out there in the industry. Providers are getting bombarded and trying to get classes. There's not enough time and enough hours in instructors to get all this done in that time frame. Karen. Yes, Karen.
Yeah, the questions are starting to pour in. Okay, if I know you addressed not getting the classes done before the license renewal date, which is September 30th. But the questions coming in, if they can't get it done by June 30th, but they get it done by September 30th, will there be a penalty or what will happen there? And I'm starting to get those because of course they're saying in all fairness, I planned on doing it by my renewal date of 9/30, and that's what I'll do. So that is going to be a question that we, across the board, the people that are answering the hotline and licensed services it's going to come up more and more, that question. So I think it's two different things. It's one, if they don't get it done by June 30th, and then two, you mentioned if they don't get it done by September 30th, or maybe you meant June, I'm not sure, but I mean, they always had to have it done by September 30th. So that's, I don't know if they would get a break.
Well,
for that,
the June would be the 3 months or 90 days prior to renewal.
Right, right, and that's a question coming in. If
Yeah.
I get it done, not by June 30th, but I get it done by September 30th, which was always the date, am I going to be penalized for that? So
Right.
if the question is asked to legal, that's, it is coming up.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
Yep, I totally agree. The questions keep coming in, and anytime anybody's asking me, I'm saying, all you can do is go by what the law says right now. I mean, that's what it says. Okay. And, you know, one of the things about this is that Department of Consumer Protection has so many licenses that they, in credentials that they issue. Not all of them require continued education, but a number of them do. And it's kind of like this one statement that was put out, or this one public act that was put out, is like, you know, one size fits all. And I truly don't believe that that's the case, particularly based on the timing of when it came out. So we're gonna have to talk about that with legal to see what their plan is. I'd like to know what their plan is. We, if anybody, the licensing board, because that we're, besides the department getting the calls, you know, a lot of us get the calls, and a lot of the providers get the calls, and then they call us and say, what's going on? And we're saying, we don't know. We should not be left in that position. So it's an issue we need to address and have an answer to. So. Okay. Yes.
Just following up with that, I think the other thing that has to be taken into consideration too is the license holders were just notified. I believe the emails started coming out in February, but the curriculum wasn't released to the providers until almost after January. So we almost started 3 months in a lot of cases behind the 8 ball.
Right.
You know, really, I think in order for that requirement to be met, the curriculum has to be available July 1st for all the providers in order to start preparing and give the license holder ample time to complete the continuing ed requirement. I think that was one of the major factors this year. And the other thing too is, speaking as a provider, I'm still limiting my class size due to COVID concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I think all those factors really, it's unfortunate that this couldn't have been addressed to extend it out through an executive order for this short time and then implement it effective 2023.
I did make that request that is something the commissioner could do, or did it have to be by executive order? And it really didn't go anywhere as far as I'm concerned. Again, I totally agree with you, Paul. The COVID has not helped anything here. Seems to have affected so many things. But I had offered this, that could they change the effective date, which was it October or July? It was October 1st of 2021, right? Could they change that, go back to the general law and change it to October 1st of 2022 at least? It gives people time to react. I'm starting to put together some outline, real quick outline and notes of the 2023 program, because we do need to put that out relatively soon. I mean, here it is February, you know, middle of February, and we're probably going to have a couple of special meetings to get this done, because they've only got us slated for 4 meetings, and our next meeting is May and then August. So, I mean, you know, but we can always have special board meetings to do this stuff, but we're kind of left out and not knowing what the plan is, and we need to know that so we can deal with it. That's why I've started drafting some stuff. Plus, as long as we're talking about this, unlike the way we've been submitting the providers have been submitting their curriculums to us. In the next 2023, it'll be an all online submittal. Okay. The plumbers are trying it right now as to the permanent means of what they're hoping to do. We electrical board, myself, I have been looking at stuff that comes in through an FTP site. We're trying to do it that way, which is a temporary fix. And so far it's worked pretty well, I gotta admit. Okay, it does. But there's gonna be a little bit of a learning process for providers, okay? Not to mention board. So it's a good move in the right direction, I think, to bring them in that way. It's certainly going to eliminate a lot of mailing, especially with the way we're all set up today. Right now, prior to them setting up this FTP site that Karen and I use, they would mail the stuff to the department. Karen would get it when she got it there. She would quickly turn it around, send me one of the thumb drives, mail it back out to me, thumb drive. And then I would get into it and look at it. And then I would send her back an email with comments to send back to the provider. Whereas the new system, all that stuff should be able to happen online. And, trying to minimize some of the handling of paper, et cetera, and burden that it puts on the department. The department itself is far from being far from having too many employees. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of stuff going on, and they could use a lot more. But it's a good way to start. It's a good way to start, and I think it's a good way to get it done ultimately. So that's what's happening with that. Moving on, the application review working group. Again, we've been meeting pretty regularly. There's been applicants that have been approved based on criteria set out by Paula Annan from the Department of Consumer Protection, the legal department. And we've been following that. Ideally trying to put together, if you will, I'm going to call it a spreadsheet of the license category for a particular state and how it applies to our license. And to some extent, it can work, but there's always some other depth you always seem to need. So that's something that's, as far as I'm concerned, a work in process and can be very frustrating during those meetings to get past some.
Mr. Chairman, if I may make a comment on this, please.
Sure, John.
The Rhode Island telecom license is equivalent to our T2, not the C6, because it does not include any fire alarm work in there, which at this point is covered by the Rhode Island fire alarm license, which is a separate license just for fire. So at this point, you're going to take someone who does data installation, and they're supposed to understand the concepts of fire and NFPA 72 and all of that, which is not a requirement of their Rhode Island license.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I would say that should be that they're going to do it a C2, or not a C2, rather a T2 or T1 in that case would be the applicable license. Other than that, the Rhode Island has a separate fire alarm. They have a separate burglar alarm license. And the C6 covers burg, fire, and obviously data, telephone. So once someone comes in with a license in that particular category of data, they can do any of that work in the state of Connecticut, which would be currently out of the Rhode Island requirements.
Yeah, and let me just add something here that although it says the application review group, the determined that the following license types are equivalent, we still look at each one. This isn't just a carte blanche thing. I look at every application in detail and what they have, and we're trying to get them to submit background information and requirements for that particular license in that particular state, so we can compare it to what's required here. So normally we would pick that up, John, but it could be missed too. So that's why, as far as I'm concerned, you still need to look at the applications, because the application tells you a lot. There's a
Would
lot
it
of
be so much easier for you and anyone else reviewing it just to simply say that if you're dealing in data, telephone communications, that it is equal to the T2 in the state of Connecticut?
Well, yeah, but here's the thing I'm looking at too, is what's the work experience that the person has or hasn't had as far as OJT. And of course, the related instruction almost has a little bit more impact, or it certainly has a substantial impact on, in this case, whether it's a C6 or T2. There's no clean submittal typically, in my opinion, that is just automatic yet. I don't see it, because even on the E2s, okay, with Massachusetts, depending on how they obtain that license, they may or may not have ever gone through an apprenticeship program, okay, because of some of the other states. They've done it through reciprocity, okay. So, I mean, we try to keep our standards pretty reasonable and pretty high to protect our people here in Connecticut. And we continue to try to do that, but this is an ongoing thing. Again, it's part of trying to get some things tailored as best we can. But
Well, I've expressed my thoughts on it and go from there.
no, no, I appreciate your thoughts, John, and you're right. You're right. If you look at it just per blanc, the way it is written here. Anybody else got any questions on that? Okay. Oops. Okay, item number 2. Okay, item number 2 has to do with the president of SignPro appearing here today to have a discussion relative to signs and determination of at what point is the license truly required. I read through this, and we're going to bring him on in just a minute here, but I read through some of the emails back and forth on this issue. And I believe the issue here is basically that if somebody goes out and changes the face on an electrified sign, is that classified as electrical work? But let's bring Mr. Rapocchio, is that how he said his name? Good
morning.
Okay. Good morning.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair and the committee. We certainly appreciate, first of all, everything you do. For myself as a business owner for 32 years here in Connecticut as a manufacturer who employs 75 full-time staff in Southington, Connecticut here at one of our plants. We do work throughout the state, the region, USA, Canada, weekly throughout our staff here that make these components. We are UL Underwriter Laboratory listed. Our facility in Connecticut is listed. We have very strict and stringent guidelines, SAM books, which are the material components that are required to manufacture a UL listed component. We fall under a strict guideline to have our electrified cabinets built in a certain manner. We are inspected quarterly by Underwriter Laboratories. My installation staff all fall under me with our C7, C8 licensing with the Connecticut Bureau, as well as Rhode Island and other states that we are required to do so. The way the requirement reads, and I'm all for the continuing ed, which our staff does yearly at the Tungus with the Tungus group. Instructor is great. We've gone there every year. We've already scheduled our July 30th deadline, as I heard you guys talking earlier. So we're a very proactive group, and whatever we can teach our staff to keep them safe is what we do. We've gone 32 years now. We've never had a DOT violation. We've never had an OSHA on-site violation. We work for Amtrak. We work for Metro North and all the cities. We're a Connecticut State Trade Service contractor. We've never had a violation with Underwriter Laboratories, an investigation any further. So we keep a very tight ship here. So thank you again for all you do. And I just want to make sure that we interpret what is being taught to us by our continuing ed instructors and what is so strict in our understanding that we want to be sure that the municipalities also understand it the same way that it's being taught and kept to us in a high standard. So when we build a UL component cabinet or an electrified cabinet that requires this listing, one of those components is the sign face. We cannot just put in any regular piece of plastic, polycarbonate. It has to be made, it has to be listed with UL for fire ratings, for a lot of different reasons, for strength, for wind load, so on and so forth. So our question that came up again with our continuing ed was that the way the law reads with Connecticut is that anything that is altered in an electrified sign must be done with a C7, C8 license holder. It states that in your limited electrical sign contractor's license description. Therefore, some towns refer to anything, if someone goes to a sign and takes one screw out of that sign that's electrified, they better know what they're doing. And that's why we hold you to a C7 and C8. Mm-hmm. And we support that as well because our staff obviously abides by the laws of Connecticut. And we want to be sure that the municipalities are on the same, who are either approving these permits or requiring the contractors to approve these permits, or for those that don't apply for permits and strictly moonlight or do this after hours unlawfully. So per the consumer protection, the alteration of any component requires a C7 and C8 license. So we just want to confirm, because it is confirmed by UL, that the sign face must be UL listed. Therefore, it is a component, and that the state of Connecticut understands, as the instructors that teach the course, that a C7 and C8 license is required.
Yes, or in E1 or E2.
Correct.
As well, okay.
Understood.
In my understanding of UL requirements is pretty much right in line with what you just said, that each individual component is UL, okay? But then when you put it all together, you have a total package, a total assembly, and that is ultimately UL listed or approved. So I understand where some people may think, well, it's just a piece of plexiglass or Lexan or something that we're taking off and we're changing this for, but that's fine if it's just that's all it is. But when it's an electrified sign, I I feel as though that number one, it has to be done by, again, E1, E2, C7, C8 person. And I'm gonna ask my board members to chime in on that from their perspective as well.
And if I can add one more thing, excuse me. So the question is let's say someone comes in and does change what we call the face, and the sign catches on fire, there's an issue, there's a loss, whatever it may be. Please understand that those UL certified numbers that are applied to the sign and affixed to the sign in our facility, because it needs to be done in our facility, not in the field. It must be done at the facility. That holds bearing and liability. So therefore, we have, or may have, somebody who's unlicensed, not knowing what to do, how to act in the sense of UL, or by code by a E1 or E2 practice, C7, C8, now jeopardizing that UL. So what happens now is that UL is now void because the product that is put into that sign may not meet the requirement of UL. And we don't have a way to track that, especially if there's not a sign permit pulled. So now that UL licensed component, which you are correct, it's only licensed when the assembly is fully made, is now in void, and now that sits on a building unknown with what components are in it, which may cause a loss, which will bring public safety issues and so on and so forth.
Peter, if I may ask, if a customer calls you out and they say, we've got an illuminated sign here, box sign, if you will, illuminated box sign, and the tenant moved out and we're bringing in a new tenant, and the new tenant's name is this, and this is what we need put up there. How do you handle that?
Well,
Do you literally take the sign down, bring it back to your shop and make that change so that it's all done in the UL environment?
it does not need to be. So what happens is this: if the sign is UL, then I need to be sure that the component that I'm putting into that sign is in the SAM book of the UL. So the sign should be UL. If the sign is not UL, but requires to be UL, that means that I need to bring a UL inspector to the field, one option, and have them certify out in the field.
Yeah.
And he will label the sign, or, which is about $1,500 to $3,000 per sign, or I can remove the sign off the building, return it to my shop, be sure to retrofit it and refurbish it based on the UL standards, label it, and then it can go out in the field to be inspected. A label cannot be installed in the field by anyone, including myself, which I'm the business owner and the certified holder.
Yeah, other than a UL person, the UL inspector could. Okay, I've had experience with that many years ago in the town of, well, the town doesn't make any difference, but relative to a dimming control system and the number of components that go in that theatrical stage dimming system, and how they all have to be UL listed and approved, and then listed, then the entire assembly becomes a UL listed assembly. You can't just take somebody else's components and stick them in there without violating it. So yeah, I'm familiar with that, and I totally agree with your comments. So board members, comments.
I would have one. Go ahead, Richard.
No,
Oh, go ahead, John.
go ahead, John.
Okay, is this something that is being proactive, or is this a continuing problem that you're encountering?
No, what we want to do is we just want to, it always comes up, and the situation bears need. Again, it started off as a general inquiry to the consumer protection, and then it was asked of me to present this to you folks today. But this is ongoing in several different towns. But what happens then is that the towns also understand, well, we need a UL. And the whole UL misunderstanding is that it just needs a label. Well, that's another problem because they're not understanding the UL requirements of the UL, but that's beyond the sign phase. So I just want to clarify the word alteration because that's very important to me and very important, honestly, to our insurance company, because I can't be responsible for a component that this company builds with a certain standard, strict, very strict standard, and then have another company or person put their hands in a sign with no record keeping if they don't pull a permit, or they do pull a permit but don't have the right license. That's an issue.
Mr. Byrd.
I am going to, the question that I had was very similar to what Mr. Yuza just pointed out. And after hearing from Peter, I do agree with that. I mean, it's important to keep that UL listing.
Who's calling, please?
Assembly.
Mr. Yuza, you're mute, please. Go ahead, John. Rich.
Yeah, and without the proper documentation of that, you know, I fully agree. You know, where does the liability fall? You know, on the UL listing of that particular product, the sign installer. So I'm in full agreement with you on that one.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I concur, Larry. I think Peter's right. Having serviced a bunch of signs before, I know that some of them are complete disasters once you look behind the cover. They've been retrofitted, they've been changed. It's, you know, none of the covers are on, the wireways are back on, and everything else. I agree. Anything, it's the same as if someone goes in and services any UL listed appliance, refrigerator, or, you know, anything else. It's got to maintain the UL certification or else it's not valid. So by getting people just coming in and replacing things on their own, I concur with them.
Okay. All right. Any other board member have a comment here? Paul?
I'm in agreement with everyone else. I think it's only going to be a bigger problem as we see lighting sources in a lot of luminaire electrical signs being retrofitted. So I think now really is the time to spell it out. I think it's just going to be a bigger problem for that industry.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm going to go right to you, Richard, I think the statutes and the descriptions here on the C7 and C8 are pretty clear. I think what happens is people, such as changing the face, just a piece of Lexan, they don't give any consideration to the fact that it's a component of a complete assembly. Rich, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so that's what the department would need for clarification. I mean, right now, we always said anybody could relamp a light fixture or a box sign or whatever, but they could not touch or relamp a neon sign because it's hardwired normally. So
Alteration.
are you taking into consideration also whether a person needs to be licensed to relamp a box sign or box letters or what have you?
I don't think, and I'll let Peter just talk to that for a minute, but as far as I'm concerned, relamping is you're replacing it with the same lamp that came out of it, I'm presuming. Rich?
Yeah, that's what I'm presuming too. The other thing is on regular everyday lighting fixtures, you know, if there's a broken diffuser or you want to clean the diffuser, we never really went after somebody for doing that. But, you know, when you listen to this conversation about UL, et cetera, the everyday drop-in 2x4 fixture is UL listed 2 or ETL listed. And so maybe people shouldn't be allowed to change the diffuser on a regular lighting fixture either.
Well, I don't think we're concerned about cleaning as much as we are concerned here about an alteration. And
well, that's what I mean. Changing the diffuser, may it be a simple light fixture, or changing the plastic on signs, etc. are we saying it's all should be licensable? I mean, if a new store takes over a box sign and they want to slide out that plastic and put in another piece of plastic with their name on it, we're saying now that that would require a license. I'm not talking about any inner workings of the box sign.
It would require a license, and the license holder would have to make sure it's a UL listed piece of material they're putting in,
Right.
and so forth.
Correct. And the situation with that is that licensed person, okay, which is very important here, that licensed person is required to pull a sign permit. That's the key note there, that there's record of someone altering that sign. So it's not as easy as, hey, we're just doing some maintenance and we're washing the face down. This is altering a component of a UL listed structure, and which could jeopardize not only that, but the safety that brings. Yesterday, we were on a job. The electrician wired the sign backwards, which made the whole structure electrified. So someone grabbed the sign cabinet, which it could be, like Richard said, it could be someone on a ladder at the top ring, right? Non-OSHA, you know, just a homeowner, or it could be a business owner trying to save some money and grabs onto that cabinet, getting hit with 277 volts. That's not what you want to do. So again, we are required daily to pull permits, and that's what the license holder is required to do. So it doesn't only go with the component, but it goes with the standard that you guys were talking about earlier that the state of Connecticut needs to bring for public safety. And I think that that's so important here.
Peter, do you have anything, or can you get something to us either out of a UL book or from UL that indicates what we've just talked about and you've talked about here today? That might help us be able to draft something together to be able to get out there in either as clarification for the license of alteration, or to clarify alteration, or possibly get it, and then maybe get it over to the state building official so that he can issue that to his all his building officials in every town, so that they're aware of what's got to be done.
Well, it's clearly written in the UL, and I'm happy to do that for you, but it's a component of an electrified cabinet, which needs to be certified. So yes, I can do that for you, but the way for today's discussion, I just want it to be known that if you're altering a sign, maintaining or replacing, testing electrical signs and so forth, as it is described in our C7, C8 license, that is one of the components.
Okay. No, I think the board's totally in agreement with you, unless there's somebody from the board that disagrees, but I see a lot of head bobbing, so.
Thank you very much.
Rich, do you still have something you want to bring up?
Yeah, so, all right, so the face of the replacement of the face of the sign or alteration to the face of the sign is licensable. Now, what about relamping? Just relamping. I mean, there are companies, this sign licensure all came out, had to be 20 years ago, because Sylvania Lighting Company went to every single gas station. Yep. And they would change every light bulb, fluorescent light, any kind of fixture light bulbs as a package deal, you know? They would just uniformly just change every single one all in the same day and then go on to the next site. So that's what kind of brought this to light as far as coming up with a sign licensure. And so anyway, that's old history because I was there. But anyway, I just want to know about relamping. So if the inspector's going out, if they see someone disassembling the face of a sign and are just relamping only, are we saying that becomes licensable? Neon, we've always said, was always licensable if you touch the neon tubes, et cetera, because they're hardwired on the back side after they go through the insulator.
Yeah.
But understand that the law, the way it's written here is that anyone installing, comma, servicing, comma, or maintaining.
Right.
I would think that relamping is maintaining or servicing a sign.
That, I would agree with that.
You're taking apart, with UL, you're taking apart a component, but then you need to put it back together. Now, what happens is UL, when they show up here unannounced and do their testing, they will ask you to build a sign in a certain manner, in a protocol, and in order, and then put it back together. Now, when you put it back together, they also do a water test to be sure that that water does not leak within the component. So if you have someone who's unlicensed, who doesn't know this, then what happens is they only put 3 screws in a sign retainer at the top instead of 12 screws that they took out. And now you got rainwater, which brings in a whole nother issue of, you know, why do these signs look the way they do? Why are all the ballast blown up? Why are all the switches corroded? And now what happens is that the sign no longer meets the UL criteria, but my Sign Pro label is on the side of that sign, manufactured here in Connecticut with a UL certification, and the sign burns down, and all the fingers point to me and not the guy down the street, let's say, who put in a sign, maintained it, changed the light bulbs without a license or a permit. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think my response, Rich, is that and I was just reading it as Peter was saying, you know, installing, servicing, maintaining. I mean, that's servicing the sign, changing the lamps. I mean, to some people, it may seem that it's a very simple thing, but, you know, and or maintaining. I mean, next thing you know, they're going to change the ballast in it. Well, we're going to change the ballast to this type of ballast. We put the wrong ballast in, or what? That's why we have licensing. So I say, unfortunately, as much as people don't want to hear it, yes, changing lamps is going to be part of this license. It's
All right, then I have a question pertaining to, we have 2 UL products here. We have the drop-in light fixture, and we have the box sign or letter sign or whatever. So are we saying that you could relamp light fixtures without a license, but not signs?
That's good, a reasonable point.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I think looking at the two, we have, you know, different forces on them. For one, you have, you know, a sign that's maybe up 50, 75 feet in the air. It's a specialized bucket truck. We have the wind factor, environmental factors, things like that. I think that's a little different than cleaning a diffuser in an office building where the person's on a 4-foot step ladder. I understand what Rich is saying, but, you know, I know especially with something like gas stations, those are rebranded left and right. And I see companies come in and they're in and out in a day, changing the entire thing, including the signs and all that. And like I said, I wound up servicing those for a little while, and I can tell you what, they're atrocious.
yeah.
And Mr. Chair, to comment on Mr. Jennings' comment, you're absolutely right. But the person who comes in for that day needs to pull a permit for that day. That person needs to follow the laws of Connecticut, as we do as business owners, as liability, as public safety. And like you said, this is happening at a gas station. The worst thing you want is a fire at a gas station. So thank you all for what you do. It means a lot to me that we can stand here together, and getting on Richard's point, I think a light bulb and a light fixture is one thing. And that fixture is typically listed, but that fixture is not part of a component within a sign. That component, all of the components that are in a sign must be UL listed. When all of those components are put together and used, then it becomes a master component, which then becomes a process, which then entitles the UL listing seal or certification done by a UL manufacturer.
All right, I don't mean to cut us short here. I think we need to give a little thought to the lamping issue, as using Rich's example of a 2x4 drop-in fixture or something. But unfortunately, this board has a 10:30 meeting we have to attend as well, for some hearings. Peter, if you could be so kind to pass along to Karen any information you have on that UL side that we mentioned earlier. And then we can discuss it and probably provide our opinion at our next meeting, our next regularly scheduled meeting. I understand your problem, and just as you said, they've got to come in and take out a permit. We all know that that's the law. We also know that they don't all come in and take out a permit. They're not all law-abiding people that do different types of work, all kinds of work. That we can't do much about. That's a case of industry seeing something happening, checking to see if there's a permit on it, or the local authorities driving by and seeing somebody doing something on a sign and stopping in and seeing if they got a permit.
And thank you for
I
that.
also want to take a look at the state building code relative to when a permit is required, because there's something in there in my mind that's sticking in my mind that I want to look at that might help us in this situation.
Sure, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just, again, we want to just be understood that the sign face is a component of the fixture. So
I don't think there's any question come from this board on that part.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I wish you all the best, and I'm always here to help, and I will get that information to Karen.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
You too. Okay. Yeah, I think we need to discuss that a little bit further, but I think, I agree with them. It's a component, so it's got to be C7, C8, E1, E2. And yes, it should all be permitted, but we can't control the permit process. Bad enough the towns have enough trouble with that. So, okay, moving on. Last item, comments or concerns of any person present today. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring before the board today? Mr. Costello. Well, Mr. Costello, then I'll come to you, Mr. Yutsa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two brief things. Codes and Standards is scheduled a public review of the next state building code. It's going to be next Wednesday. It's posted on DAS's website. So this is one of the last steps for our code process. And then just to follow up with that, we're anticipating an October 1st adoption. The second question would be, is it time for the review of the E1, E2, or L5, L6, any of the license categories with PSI with the anticipation of the adoption of 2020?
I think the overall review with PSI in a number of categories is probably well overdue. And I'll ask Rich what his thought is on that, because Rich usually works with us to get that created. But
Yeah, well, the exam has been allows you to bring either version in, the current version that we've adopted or the previous version, because they obviously don't ask any questions where there's a conflict, and they ended up only having to remove a few questions out of the data bank when that occurred a few years ago. So I think if we find out for sure that public safety is definitely adopting the 2020 in October, as we get closer to that, then I think we need to invite PSI developer to go through and with us and make the changes.
Yep.
I'm not sure how many changes are going to occur when we go to 2020. I mean, I guess I should buy the book and ahead of time and see where the changes are.
I'll bet you PSI already knows how many changes, because I'm sure there's other states that are on 20.
Already on it. Well, they do, and all their database is flagged by states that can use the question and what year version. So,
Okay.
I mean, they're really on the ball, but you're right. We should have a workshop come fall or before that. If you think we're definitely going forward with 2020.
Okay, yep, I think let's keep that on our radar, and then once we know, it's gotta go through the legislature to adopt it, right, Paul?
Sorry, looking for my mute button. Yeah, the process has changed a little bit. So next step will be the public review next week. That'll go back. Then it goes reg review. I believe already reviewed it, and then it should move forward after that. So it's looking pretty good.
Okay, great. So that would be the 23rd.
Correct. I believe at 1:30.
Okay, great. I think John, John, you had a question still, or a comment.
Based on time, I'll just make it quick. I think it's been 5+ years since we had a meeting with ESI and long overdue. That's number one. And also, is there any problem having any additional, I'll say a board workshop? Because we have a number of things that keep getting put off several months that are becoming more timely. And I would at least make that suggestion.
Sure. John, would you mind sending me a list of those items in your mind? And then I think it's probably not a bad idea to have a workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Good point.
Can we take a 5-minute potty break?
I think we have to change media here, and because we have to go on to a team meeting, I believe. Is that right, Karen?
Yes, we do have Evan Dantos from Robinson and Cole.
Oh.
Maybe we just want to confirm that he didn't have any comments. Usually he says no, and he's just here to observe. Other than that, yes, I do believe you have a hearing that Terry Jo is running that she's waiting for you on. Evan, can you hear us?
Evan, are you there? Because right now you're muted. We just want to make sure you didn't have anything you wanted to address before the board. Let's see.
Yeah.
If you're
He's
having,
muted on his end.
yeah, it sounds like, can you send us a quick note through the Q&A? If you're all set, just say all set. If you're not, then ask what you need. Sounds like somebody's typing.
You may not have any input based on, on previous meetings.
Say that again, Karen.
He may not have any input
Yeah.
based on previous meetings.
Yeah,
They were stuck with him, and he just says that he's here to observe. So
yeah.
I'm not sure what you want to do, but it's muted on his end. So
I think, Evan, if you do have something, forward it over to Karen, because we have to conclude this meeting. And then Karen can forward it out to myself. Anything else by the board members? Okay. Karen, could I ask you to do me a favor?
Sure.
Are you able to reach out to, I'm trying to think, Cynthia, I think, handling these meetings today? And just tell her we're running late?
yes, I will. I'll send
Okay.
that.
Because we all,
Terry Jo a meeting and just
Terry
let
Jo,
them
yeah.
know that we're finishing up now. And
we all need to take a little break.
okay. All right.
Okay.
I'll send an email.
We'll get on board as soon as we can.
Okay, I will stop the recording whenever the meeting
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second,
Make the motion.
And second by Peter, is that right? Second by Bird.